Ladies and gentlemen, OG John AG here. Before we jump into what just lit up Washington, quick heads up, the WhatsApp group link is in the description. If you're not in there, you're missing the real-time layer, the fast alerts, the yo, this just moved, the context that never makes it into the polished headlines. That group is where I post when markets start moving like they've had 3 shots of espresso. Check it out when you're done, because it's the difference between hearing about a move tomorrow and being positioned when it starts. And yes, Economic Ninja Part 4 is live right now. Watch it after this. Also, the stats are wild. Around 75% of you are watching but not subscribed. I'm not here to beg or chase numbers. If this unfiltered edge is actually sharpening your view, hit subscribe so I know you're part of the committed squad. If it's not adding value, don't. I want a real community, not another mainstream echo chamber of recycled talking points. Now, let's talk about the thing that just landed like a meteor in the silver world, because it isn't just news. It's a storyline rewrite. Reuters reported that U.S. lawmakers have introduced legislation to create a $2.5 billion strategic silver stockpile. Read that again slowly. Not gold, not lithium, not copper, silver. And multiple reports say the White House is actively considering a strategic silver reserve as policy. That's not a casual maybe. That's a signal, and it's loud. Here's why you should care. Strategic reserves are not built for abundance. Nobody builds a reserve for something they can get anytime, anywhere, in unlimited amounts. Strategic reserves exist for scarcity, for national security, for supply chain choke points that can freeze an economy or cripple military readiness. The U.S. keeps a strategic petroleum reserve because energy is defense, logistics, transport, agriculture, everything. It worries about critical minerals because modern aircraft, precision munitions, satellites, guidance systems, sensors, and secure communications are all built on materials you can't just swap out when a supplier gets cut off. Strategic planning is literally the government admitting, if we lose access to this, we have a problem. And the irony is thick. The U.S. pushed silver out of daily money generations ago. Silver became old finance, a relic, something the average person stopped thinking about. For decades, the cultural message was simple. Paper and digits are modern, metals are nostalgia. You were supposed to believe metal was irrelevant and abundance was guaranteed because the system was stable and global trade was smooth. But now the very system that sidelined silver is waking up and trying to lock it in a vault like it's critical infrastructure. Because it is. So why now? Why silver? What do they know that most people don't? Because silver isn't just a shiny metal anymore. It's industrial wiring. It's the hidden nervous system of the electrified world. Silver has the highest electrical conductivity of any metal and exceptional thermal conductivity, which is why engineers keep coming back to it when performance matters. When you're building systems that need to move electricity with minimal loss, handle heat without failure, and operate reliably under stress, silver is the best-in-class option. There are substitutes in some cases, but substitutes usually mean lower performance, higher failure rates, larger components, or new manufacturing headaches. That's not a real substitute when you're building millions of devices or mission-critical systems where downtime isn't annoying. It's dangerous. Let's talk applications, because this is where the story stops being investment chatter and becomes national power. Solar panels use silver paste in conductive layers. You're not building a solar future with wishes. You're building it with conductors. Electric vehicles rely on silver across power electronics, charging systems, relays, sensors, and internal connections that must survive heat, vibration, and constant cycling. Modern semiconductors and the equipment that makes them live in a world of extreme precision, and silver is threaded throughout that ecosystem. AI data centers are power-hungry beasts. Electricity in, electricity out, heat management, high-performance connectors, reliability requirements, redundancy, and nonstop uptime. Then you've got telecom infrastructure like 5G equipment, and beyond that you've got defense applications where failure isn't an inconvenience. It's a catastrophe. Now zoom out. Demand is rising, and it's not rising politely. It's rising like the world is electrifying everything at once, because that's exactly what's happening. Transportation is shifting toward electrification. Power grids are being modernized. Data centers are expanding. Defense systems are upgrading. Manufacturing is being reshored in some places, which means building new infrastructure that consumes more industrial metals. Meanwhile, supply hasn't kept pace. Industry reporting has pointed to repeated deficits where demand outstrips mine production, and the gap gets filled by recycling and above-ground inventories. That might sound manageable until you realize inventories aren't infinite, and recycling isn't a magic fountain. Recycling depends on collection systems, economics, processing capacity, and time. And time is the one thing supply chains don't have when the pressure turns up. People love to say, "Oh, there's plenty of silver." Sure, in the ground. But strategic planning isn't about geology. It's about deliverable supply at the moment you need it, in the form you need it, at the purity you need it, without your competitor holding the keys. There's a huge difference between "it exists somewhere" and "we can secure it under stress." And there's another difference that matters. A large portion of silver is mined as a byproduct of other metals like lead, zinc, copper, and gold. That means silver supply doesn't just ramp because the silver price rises. It ramps if the economics of those other metals ramp, or if miners invest in new projects that can take many years to bring online. So silver can stay tight even when the price is shouting, "We need more." Here's another detail most people ignore. Silver used in industrial applications often doesn't come back quickly, if it comes back at all. Silver in big bars sitting in a vault can be melted, traded, moved, reallocated. But silver spread thin across millions of solar panels, circuit boards, sensors, coatings, medical components, and specialized connections is dispersed and embedded. Recovering it can be uneconomic or delayed. That means a portion of demand behaves like consumption. The metal doesn't neatly return to market on your timetable. It gets locked into devices and infrastructure, and by the time it becomes recyclable, you might be talking about years, sometimes decades, and that's if the recycling economics still makes sense at that future moment. Now layer in geopolitics, because this is where it gets real. Over the past couple of years, we've watched major powers tighten export controls and flex leverage over critical materials. That isn't random. It's a reminder that in a world where supply chains are weaponized, dependence is vulnerability. Countries that control processing, refining, or key inputs can turn the dial from normal commerce to strategic pressure overnight. If you're sitting in Washington and your job is to keep the lights on and keep the defense supply chain running, you don't get to be optimistic. You get to be paranoid in a professional way. You get paid to assume stress scenarios will happen, because the cost of being wrong is national pain. Silver sits right in the intersection of industrial necessity and strategic exposure. And the global landscape is shifting toward blocks, not a single friendly marketplace. BRICS countries have talked openly about reducing dependence on the dollar in trade. Major producers are exploring settlement systems and partnerships that lean on tangible value. Central banks have been accumulating hard assets for years. Whether you think that's slow or world-changing, the direction matters. More hedging, more just-in-case behavior, more strategic stockpiling, more emphasis on things that can't be printed and can't be sanctioned into existence. So put it together. Lawmakers push a strategic silver stockpile. The White House considers it, and the story shifts from silver is a commodity to silver is a strategic national asset. That's not a meme. That's policy-level reclassification. It's the kind of shift that changes how industries procure, how investors evaluate risk, and how rivals respond. Let's get tactical, because I know some of you are watching with charts open. The price you see on screens is one layer. The price you pay for physical is another. Physical premiums are the market's lie detector. When spot prints one number, but coins and bars cost meaningfully more, that spread is reality leaking through the paper curtain. It reflects inventories, mint capacity, distribution bottlenecks, shipping delays, and immediate demand. Premiums aren't everything, but they are a signal you should take seriously because they show you where the real-world stress points are. And now we have to talk about the elephant, the paper market. Silver has been financialized into a world of contracts, derivatives, and promises, huge silver, volume that can trade without any metal changing hands. In calm times, that system functions because most players never ask for delivery. They're trading price exposure, not the metal. But the structural risk is obvious. Deliverable metal is finite, and paper claims can multiply. When too many parties want the same physical thing at the same time, the machine strains, then it starts to bend, and if the pressure gets high enough, it snaps. Some paper products can settle in cash by design. That's how the plumbing is built. And if a squeeze hits, cash settlement might happen at an official price while physical metal trades at a different reality. Higher premiums, long delays, rationing, and allocation only. If you've ever watched a store shelf go empty during a panic, you know how fast the story changes from plenty available to sorry, limits per customer. Commodities do the same thing, just with bigger numbers, longer lead times, and more complicated contracts that suddenly get very literal. Now bring it back to the strategic reserve idea and do the math in plain language. A $2.5 billion stockpile represents tens of millions of ounces, depending on the price at purchase. That is not a rounding error. That is a meaningful chunk of annual supply being removed from the open market and placed under government control. And once a government starts treating a material as strategic, procurement tends to become recurring policy infrastructure, not a one-time shopping trip. Reserves get replenished. They get expanded. They become part of national planning. A line item becomes a habit, and habits can become permanent. But let's stay balanced. Bills can die. They can get watered down, delayed, slow-walked into oblivion. Politics is the art of postponing the obvious. There are industries that benefit from cheap silver, and those industries have influence. There are budget battles and competing priorities. And even if something passes, government purchasing often moves slowly and deliberately. They won't want to spike prices and hurt the industries they're trying to protect, so buying could be phased, quiet, and designed to avoid sudden disruption. They might structure purchases through contracts, staggered deliveries, and procurement schedules that don't scream panic. That's the bearish case. This turns into a long debate, silver chops in a range, and the paper system keeps managing perceptions. Here's the bullish counter that matters even if the government doesn't by tomorrow. The signal has been sent. Procurement departments pay attention to strategic reserve talk because it means future competition for supply. If you're a solar manufacturer, an EV producer, a defense contractor, or a semiconductor supplier, you don't wait for a bill to become law to adjust. You build buffers. You lock in contracts. You diversify suppliers. You secure forward deliveries. You front-run risk. That behavior itself can tighten supply because it shifts demand from just-in-time to just-in-case, and just-in-case is how you get shortages. Then there's the international response. If the U.S. starts accumulating a critical material rivals don't applaud, they react. Strategic competition can trigger copycat reserves, preferential supply deals, export controls, or long-term partnerships with producing nations. That's how a tight market turns into an allocation market, where it's not just the price, it's whether you can get it at all. And once the world enters that mode, price becomes the language of scarcity. It can move fast because the market is trying to ration limited supply across too many urgent needs. That's when the charts stop looking like smooth lines and start looking like staircases and spikes. Now add the monetary layer, because it's the quiet undercurrent. The U.S. runs enormous deficits and carries enormous debt, while global trust dynamics are shifting. Financial tools have been used aggressively, and countries are building hedges and alternatives. Even if the dollar remains dominant, fragmentation encourages tangible hedges. Traditionally, gold is the king of that conversation. But silver is the wild card because it sits between money and industry, precious, but also essential and more sensitive to industrial cycles. That dual role makes it volatile, misunderstood, and sometimes hated, but it also makes it uniquely positioned when industrial demand is strong and the desire for tangible assets rises at the same time. And conditions are aligning. Electrification, AI build-out, defense modernization, reshoring, geopolitical fragmentation, and a rising desire for tangible hedges. Those forces all push toward more demand pressure, more strategic behavior, and more stress on supply chains. It's not one catalyst, it's a stack of them. It's a pile of dry wood with sparks landing every week, and you don't need every spark to become a fire for the environment to get hotter. So if you're holding physical silver, this isn't just a headline. It's validation that silver is being recognized as critical to the future economy. Whether legislation passes next quarter or gets revived later, the trajectory matters. The real question becomes timing and magnitude. Does this unfold slowly, or does it snap? Does the paper system keep the lid on until a dislocation forces reality into the open? Do industrial users quietly stockpile until shortages become obvious only when it's too late? Do governments compete in a way that makes today's tight market look like the calm before the storm? Nobody can promise an outcome. Markets are messy and politics is messy. But here's what's not messy. When institutions start treating a metal as strategic, they're not doing it because everything is fine. They're doing it because they see risk, dependency, and a bottleneck that could become a national problem. Combine repeated deficits, rising industrial demand, and the possibility of sovereign accumulation, and you get an asymmetric setup. Downside tends to be cushioned by physical buying interest at lower levels because real-world users and real-world holders show up when they smell value. Upside can reprice violently if a real squeeze develops. Because you can't deliver what you don't have, you can't electrify the world without conductive inputs, and you can't print silver into existence with a policy memo. So here are your takeaways in plain OG language. 1. A strategic silver stockpile being discussed at the federal level is a national security signal, an institutional acknowledgement that scarcity and dependency are real concerns. 2. It adds the possibility of sustained government demand into a market already under pressure, even before you count the demand reaction from industrial procurement teams who will front-run risk. 3. The geopolitical and monetary implications extend beyond the headline number, because once a resource is treated as strategic, it attracts strategic behavior from every player who doesn't want to be last in line. What's unresolved is the timeline, whether this passes, how it's funded, how fast procurement moves, and how other nations and industries respond. Those variables decide whether we get a slow burn or a fast breakout. Do your own research. Verify sources. Understand what you own. Know the difference between physical metal and paper exposure. Know your risk tolerance. This is analysis, not advice. The goal is clarity, not hype. Watch what they do, not what they say. When institutions move to secure resources, that's the chess move, not the press release. Stack smart if you stack. Trade disciplined if you trade. Don't let emotions write your strategy. Logic beats hype every time. OG out and about.